Welcome to another edition of Around the Town with Hez Brown. And now your host, Hezekiah Brown.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Around the Town with Hez Brown. This bi-weekly community affairs show will present issues and information that affects you. If you have any comments or ideas for a future show or topic, reach us on the WRVS-899 Facebook page or on Twitter. Use hashtag Around the Town. And I have to tell you today, I am just so excited because we have a special guest. And when I say special guest, I really mean special guest. The Chief of Police for Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Good afternoon, Chief.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brown. How are you today?
I am doing excellent to perfect.
Great, sir.
I often say I've seen worse days in my lifetime.
Oh, man. You're looking good.
Well, I need that. It looks are deceiving, too. But in any event, why don't we just get started on this, what we call a conversation. It is not what we consider in many areas, interviews. This is just a conversation to just inform the community about a little bit about who you are, a little bit about your responsibilities, a little bit about yourself. Right.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for having me out here today. It's an honor and a privilege to sit beside and to have a conversation with such a distinguished gentleman as yourself and what you have done for this community and this state and even this country prior to coming down here to North Carolina and the great state of New York. So I appreciate the opportunity and I say thank you. But to our listening audience, my name is Eddie Buffaloe. I do serve as your Chief of Police here in the great city of Elizabeth City. This is my 27th year in law enforcement. However, my 5th year as your Chief of Police here. I'm a native of Northampton County. I was born in the metropolitan city of Potty-Casey, North Carolina, in Northampton County. And my parents still reside at the home place where we grew up there. And my mom is retired. She's a retired social worker. And my dad is a retired police chief as well. So that's how I got started in law enforcement, by growing up in a household with a law enforcement officer there in Northampton County.
You know, Chief, I'm very fortunate to have met your mother and father. I think it was the grand opening of the new headquarters, and I really was impressed with them. And it is not often that we follow in our father's footsteps. There are so many of us who decide that because my dad do it, I want to do it a different way. Was that the influence that got you in law enforcement was because of your father, or how did that happen?
It really was, Mr. Brown. My father is a staple in the community there, and I watched how he engaged and interacted with people in our community and in the county in which he served, and it was just the way he carried himself and how the public respected him and looked up to him, and the accolades that he was receiving as a young lad, being on his right side, looking at that and emulating that. And I would always say I want to be like that when I grow up. And not knowing that in 2017 I would be sitting here today talking with you about that, but it's definitely an honor and a privilege to follow in my dad's footsteps.
You know, that is so important, and I think particularly for the African American community, because I really believe that that families should not have to look outside of the family for role models. That they could look inside and see somebody in their family or their mother, their father, that they can emulate, that they want to be like, And I think you're the prime example. So congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Now let's move to the other side. Are you married? You have children?
Married, have children. I have 3 boys, and Brian, Michael, and Aaron, and I have 1 grandson named Christian. My wife is a native of Bertie County. She's a criminal defense attorney. She practices at Buffaloe Law Office there in Ahoskie, North Carolina, and she's been a practicing attorney for the last 20 years almost. And so she has an office there on her own, and very independent, smart attorney. I'm definitely not trying to throw any ads her way. But if you need a good lawyer, you can go to Buffaloe Law Firm in Ahoskie.
How sweet it is. That's great, and I think that's good. It's going to be great for your children to be able to look and point at their mother and father in terms of what they do. And that is just fantastic. As you know, I'm one of your greatest fans. I really
I appreciate that.
I am a great fan of yours because somewhere along the line I was going to say to you in this interview that the one thing that I like about you is that I have never heard, and maybe I haven't lived in a small part of the community, but maybe I don't hear, or maybe I hear and don't hear, but I've never heard a negative remark about you. And I travel all over the city, all over the state, and all over the town. And it makes me proud as an African American man to have a person in a real difficult position, and then people speak so highly of you, and that's across the racial lines and everything else. And then people look to you for leadership, which you provide very adequately, and we thank you for that. We really
I attribute that to a good upbringing and a good foundation in my family and my faith. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity, and it's an honor to serve all the citizens here in Elizabeth City and across this great state and country.
Because sometimes people decide to take on different careers. As you are successful in one. Because it is my belief that in order to be successful, it's not having a job and having seniority that gives you job security, but having the ability to move to other areas to do other things. And let me just ask this question, throw it out. You ever think about running for public office or anything like that?
I've thought about it. I definitely would think about it in the later part of my career, but I wanted to. I'm the type of person that I like to prioritize things and not put too many eggs in a basket at one time. So my real concentration is right now my profession and the service of this community and the protection and quality of life and welfare here in Elizabeth City, because it's important. Law enforcement has evolved across the spectrum in this city, across the state, and across the nation. And a lot of responsibility has been put on law enforcement officers to interact with their communities, which I think is very vital. So at this point in my career, my concentration is for the great quality of life for the citizens here in Elizabeth City, and maybe some future aspirations down the road. But right now, my primary focus is serving as the chief of police.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm glad you didn't close the door, because so many people close the door. See, because I'm just saying, in this day and age, you need good, honest people with integrity to serve in elected positions, And so I just thought about it. I decided to throw it out. It wasn't in my previous questions, but I just see you as just a person that would be an excellent candidate for anything. I should say it right.
Well, I appreciate it. It's that door is, I would say, down my hallway. Okay. And it's definitely not closed, and it's definitely a possibility at some point. But right now, primarily serving as a chief.
Okay, well, let's get back on the track. We just kind of moved away a little bit. I often do that anyway, So what do you like best about being in law enforcement?
I think what I really like best is this environment, an open, honest dialogue and engagement, because the only way I can get better, number one, as a person and as a public servant, is open dialogue. So I like the openness, I like the dialogue, I like service, and I like service to mankind. And that's very important to me. My dad instilled that us as youngsters, and being the youngest child in our family, he instilled us to do unto others as they would have them do unto you. And to me, that was all about service. And I saw my dad go down the street and fix water leaks for free and take people to the doctor's office for free. And it was about service. And that's the most important thing that I love about this job, is meeting different people from all spectrums of life, all walks of life, all genders, all race, all ethnicity, and being able to provide a service and have an open, honest dialogue. We may not agree all the time, and you may not support or agree with how law enforcement handles some investigations and some things, but at least we can have an open dialogue. And it's all about service at the end of the day as it relates to running a police department.
Now, I know that in every job, I've been working a lot of years in my lifetime. As a matter of fact, when I retired the first time, I had been working various jobs for 58 years. And that's a long time to be working. But there was some peaks and valleys. There was some good days and some bad days. And then there was some days that was better than the bad days.
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about some of what might be your worst nightmare, as a policeman.
Well, I can recall in law enforcement serving alongside of my father. I was off on this particular day, and it was in 1996. I was off. My brother and I were fishing, and we received the call that our father had been shot in the line of duty. And that was probably the most worst call on the other end I've ever received at that particular time, because I've dealt with it in my career where a partner or another officer was shot, but it hits close to home when you get the call and your father was shot, because you just saw your father that morning, and now you're rushing to the hospital to be along his bedside to comfort him and to comfort my mom at that particular time. But on a day-to-day basis, any acts of violence for me is the worst nightmare upon anybody. It bothers me when people resort to acts of violence to try to solve an issue, and that's my worst nightmare.
Yeah, again, part of what I do and part of sponsoring this program has to do with anti-violence, anti-domestic violence, psychological violence, all these things.
Right.
That's part of what I do. And so when you touched on the word violence, it kind of raised me up, because a lot of folks don't realize about violence that there are more than one way to create violence.
Absolutely.
You don't have to put your hands on another person to create violence. You can do it by degrading another person, by name calling. There's all kind of ways, by screaming at people, calling them names. All of these are acts of violence, and many folks don't believe that. They think that, I didn't commit any violence. I didn't put my hands on them. But you can do more damage to a person sometime by not putting your hands, but how you treat them, where it affects their emotion or their emotional basis. And so many times you don't get arrested for it, but sometimes you can get arrested for it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. But anyway, it's just one of those little nuggets I thought that I would throw in at that point in time. The one thing that I know, Chief, you have in order to be the chief of police, you have so many duties. It's not like I go to work and I put this nugget in this place here, or I drive a truck or drive a car. Your job, makes you almost have to be an expert in a wide range of fields. You have to know a lot about a lot of things. You have to know how to dialogue with people, how to interview people, how to manage. I don't know how many is on the police force. You can tell me, but you have to manage a police force with different personalities, different backgrounds. You got all these things that you have to do. That's part of the chief's job. So tell the audience a little bit about what it's like being the chief of police in our great city.
Well, serving as a chief is very unique in its broad perspective in law enforcement, dealing with the administration part of the police department, budgeting, training, state requirements, federal requirements, also dealing with your patrol, field operations, and your support services. For the police department in Elizabeth City, we have 3 divisions. It's the administration division, which is the Office of Chief of Police, our internal affairs unit, our budget and training and management unit, our grants management unit, and under that division, we do a lot of budgeting, running the day-to-day policy, SOP, meeting federal and state mandates. Under our field operations is our bike patrol, our SWAT unit, our K9, and the men and women that you see in the MART units each and every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, our patrol guys and men and women, And we have our support services with our intel unit, our criminal investigations division, our drug unit, our community policing unit, and our records and management services unit. So as a police chief, you take all of those particular units and you massage that and you touch each one of those particular units every day, all day. There's walk-ins who may come in that want to speak with the chief about an issue or something good that an officer has done. You get your direction from the city manager, who gets his direction from the city council on some issues. There are goals and objectives that need to be met. There are training mandates that are required by our state of North Carolina. So on a day-to-day basis, you touch all those units and all those divisions within the police department in order to run an effective and efficient and adequate for the better quality of life for everyone within the city. So it's not like a working in a data processing where you know you're going to go in and key in certain information, which we do that, and that's very vital and that's important for the police department. But as a chief of police, you have to assert and maintain and make sure all of those nuggets and bolts all work together as one.
Okay, I think that is so important, because I think that sometimes we take it for granted because we see you're active in the community, you like, I think you clone yourself because you're like everywhere, and I think that's important. And sometimes people see you because, and they don't realize the difficulty is sometimes in having, and some of the decisions you have to make as a police, not only with the criminal, but also with your staff itself too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And on another note, sometimes it's different ways that you judge a chief of police, and you are judged probably harder than any other job, because many times you're measured by the amount of crime in the community, the amount of arrest that is made by the police department, so on, So do you really feel that since you've been here in Elizabeth City for the 5 years, you made a difference in reducing crime? Or how is that? How would you judge yourself in that area?
Yeah, we've put some measures in place to reduce crime. We've seen crime reduction anywhere from a 12 to a 17% reduction. But also crime is based on trends as well. So we've seen some increase in our property crimes, which we're working together. We have a crime reduction plan in place as we speak today to reduce some of our peaks in crimes. Our number one goal is to reduce violent crime. We've had a reduction in violent crime. So we've done well. The men and women have accepted the goals and objectives and the mission and the vision that we collectively have agreed upon and come into place. And we've done a fairly decent job. We can always get better in what we do. But our main concern is that we need support. We don't have a police officer. We have a staff of 75 on staff. That's officers and civilians. We have 65 sworn officers, and the rest are civilian staff, support services staff. And so, but it takes an entire community to affect change. Everything can't be thrown in the lap of the police department. Yes, we are the gatekeepers and the peacemakers, but it takes the entire community to work together for the good of the entire community and to affect that change. And that's why we encourage people, if they see something, say something, and we'll do something.
Yeah, because I just oftentimes as I travel throughout our community, I watch everything that go on, believe it or not. Is there any community program that you would want to encourage the citizens to rise up and assist the police department? Any kind of program?
One is reporting any strange activity. Another one is we have an anti-theft dot program that the police department has, because we're finding that most of people who have an unfortunate event of breaking and entering in their homes, they don't have all of their electronic devices or items of value logged or cataloged. They don't have the serial numbers, or they don't have the make and model. They may know the make and model, but they don't have the serial numbers. And that's very important and vital in a police investigation, because we talk to all 50 states and we talk to every law enforcement agency in this country in one particular database. And so if we had serial numbers where we could put that information in a database, that helps us track that particular merchandise and hopefully find the offender or someone who is housing stolen goods in order to intercept this particular burglary ring or people involved in the breaking and entering of homes. So Anti-Theft Dot is a great way. It's a free program for our citizens. They can come down and register and log in their electronic devices or anything of value that can put a little sticker on the back of it. And if it's a little small sticker, just smaller than a penny, and it has a number embedded into it, and it'll say the dot will actually say Anti-Theft Dot. Usually the suspect will peel that dot off, and once they peel that dot off, they actually leave the number on that particular merchandise, and we can take a black light and pull that number up visible and enter that number into our database and be able to tell us who owns it and where it was purchased, make, model, and serial number, and be able to track some of those devices down.
Wow. One of the things about doing this program, and I have to say the Around Town with Hez Brown, and one of the things I like about doing this program is that I learned so much. I learned a lot from those who come in to have this conversation, and I just learned a lot. And I hope that the listening audience heard what Chief Buffaloe said. I'm going to ask him to kind of go through that again, because you're saying that you can come to the police station and record all of your electronic devices or the things that you want to do, and then there's a number that's left on there. So if somebody steals it, there's a good chance when they're caught that you can get your equipment back. Is that correct?
That's correct. You summed it up very, very eloquently. Come down to the police station at 305 East Main Street, speak with our front desk staff, and ask for any officer, or the front desk staff will get you in contact with, and it's called Anti-Theft Dot, and it's free to you. It's a free service, and as Mr. Brown said, we'll record your serial number, make, and model of it, upload it into our system, and if they peel that dot off, or if we're looking for that particular dot, even if it's peeled off or not peeled off, we'll be able to track those stolen articles. If they're found, of course, we'll be able to know who those articles belong to, because there are a lot of items in police evidence that has been recovered, but we have no way of telling who it belongs to. And that's every department throughout this state has that same issue. So this particular program has evolved, and we would like to get a little bit more participation, because as I alluded to earlier, our property crimes are up, and we can attribute those to unemployment, opioid abuse, as we may talk about here in a little bit. But whatever crime trends there are, we need community engagement and involvement, and that portion of that piece of the nugget will be a critical piece to help us as well to try to find the perpetrator in that particular matter.
Thank you. One of the things that we find across the country, and that is that we have a new phenomenon, and that is this whole problem with opioids. That kind of drug. And I'm not sure how it affects us here in this community. I'm not sure how bad it is. I'm not sure, but I know you will know. But I know across the country, and some communities that you would least expect that this is happening, and we know it's happening on a day-to-day basis. There are many young folks who are losing their life because of this. Young families who are torn apart. Chief, do we have that kind of a problem here with the opioids? Is it a problem? Is it growing, or is it being managed, or what?
It's a national problem all across the country. We are feeling the effects here in Elizabeth City. We've had some overdose cases as directly related to opioid abuse, and it is some issues. Opioid abuse leads to accidental overdose. It leads to, of course, further hard drug abuse. It leads to property crimes. It leads to thefts. And it leads to a whole lot of things. It affects not only the community, it affects families. It affects employment for people that can't pass a drug test or a drug screen. It affects getting them employed. But one thing that I have found, Mr. Brown, is that we definitely cannot arrest our way out of this problem. We're going to need treatment for these offenders and treatment for these abusers, and that's very vital and very important, because we just can't arrest them and put them in jail because we have not solved the main issue. And that's where all the pieces of the puzzle need to come together, from not only law enforcement and the district attorney's office or the court system. There has to be some type of treatment in place to help these abusers to wean themselves off of it and to get in some type of program here. And I'm happy to say that the pieces of the puzzle here in Elizabeth City are coming together between law enforcement, the court system, and our private sector medical treatment and other clinics that are in place here. And so hopefully we'll see the bell curve take a downward spiral here in Elizabeth City as those things come into place. And as you know, for yourself, being in the workforce for so many years, that things do take time, and people got to believe in you and be able to come and get that adequate help. And so we're looking at putting some programs in place where not only arresting the offender, but getting the offender some help. Yep. And that's most important.
Just like ask this question, because I really, really and truly believe in community involvement, because the police cannot do it alone, you know. So how can the community help in this area? Is there anything that they can do? What can the community do to help address this problem? Well,
number one, if you know of someone that has that particular problem, let's get them some treatment. Number two, as I alluded to earlier, we've seen an uptick in our property crimes. One way that we've observed this is that people are leaving their doors unlocked, car doors, vehicles, and they're going through and they're rumbling through or just trying to find loose change. And so it's important that we lock up our valuables, and that lighting is the number one crime prevention tool around any residence, around any parking lot, anywhere. Lighting is very important. And so those things and taking care of the small things, and number one, reporting any suspicious activity is a plus for us as well.
Thank you. Chief, the other thing that I just want to go to another areas, and I think this opioid problem is just something that kind of sneaked up on us. You know, I don't think we were prepared for it. And matter of fact, I don't even know if we can ever prepare for these kind of things. But it just came, and it just was like moved in, and all of a sudden it's a real critical and crisis kind of a problem across the nation, not just here in Elizabeth City. I think New Hampshire has probably the worst problem in the country in terms of this, you know.
Yes, sir. And New Hampshire is a very small state,
very small,
very small. And and understand it not only affects us in law enforcement, it affects Department of Social Services, it affects our health department, it affects Centennial Albemarle Medical Center, it affects the hospital. So, but all of those teams, we have a coalition here led by the Albemarle Regional Health Services here. And they're doing an outstanding job in trying to combat this problem. We actually have officers. We actually now have to issue officers what we call naloxone or Narcan for short term to help combat overdose rates, where officers can now administer Narcan to a suspected overdose suspect or a offender, and be able to snap them out of their comatose state. So now we actually issue that to every officer with the police department. So that's a new trend for us. Yeah. And now they're taking the fentanyl and mixing it with that. So now there's a safety concern with fentanyl, because fentanyl is transdermal. It can soak through your skin and cause death if it's touched. So now we have to put measures in place where we have to buy some protection for officers and put more training in place of what they touch and what they see and what they smell. So if you see any white powder substance, don't touch it, don't smell it, don't taste it. Contact your law enforcement agency and have them come out and take possession of it. And we're going to take very great precaution in gathering that piece of evidence.
Well, Chief, that is just valuable information that you're giving, and that's why we do this program. Otherwise you're not going to hear this at many other places, in terms of this even new phenomenon that is hurting so many people across the country, and what the policemen have to do, because I said sometimes I don't think we appreciate the law enforcement enough until we have a problem. Then it's a different story. But did you hear what he just said? He said they have to wear certain kind of protective equipment so they won't be harmed by what they use to try to treat others. So just keep that in mind when you see a policeman every now and then. Just tell them thank you. Tell them thank you. Don't worry about that. They get paid. They don't get paid enough. I would guarantee you they know what's going to. But just every now and then surprise them by saying thank you for taking this kind of job, because there's so many people who simply would not be a policeman. Either one, they're afraid to be a policeman for whatever reason, or they just don't mix it with people enough. Well, okay. Thank you so much for that tip of information, Chief. And then I just want to move to another area. What about gangs? Do we have a problem with gangs? All over the country, and I travel all over, and almost every community, not in all communities, but there's a small segment of almost every state and every city that have experiencing problems with gangs. Do we have what would consider to be a gang problem here in Elizabeth City itself?
I would say we have issues with gangs. Like any gangs don't have jurisdictional boundaries. They don't get to the Camden Causeway and stop and say, I'm not coming into Elizabeth City, or I'm not going into Camden. We have seen some of our gang-related issues. However, we have seen some of our gang-related issues suppressed as well, because we have established a collaboration with our federal law enforcement partners in order to address some of our gang-related issues that we've had and are having. So those type of gang issues can be directly related to drug trafficking, to violent crimes, identity theft, money laundering, those types of things. I don't want people to get the misconception that gangs just deal with drugs and guns and violence. There are gangs out there dealing with now human trafficking. There are gangs that dealing with specifically identity theft. They're selling identities out there. So there are issues, and we try to address those issues quickly and efficiently and effectively. And we've gotten a partnership, as I said, with our federal government, law enforcement agencies, and the United States Attorney's Office, as well as our district attorney's office. As a matter of fact, we just had a meeting a couple weeks ago to put some things in place to further eradicate any gang issues that may try to rise up here in Elizabeth City. And so we stress the quality of life, and it's important to us because I remind people all the time, police officers, we're part of this community too. Our families live here, and we have a job here, and we live in this community. So we're vested, and we're a vital part of this community as well. So we do care.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Chief, thank you so much. As we wind down this program, I have to say this, that I know that, as a chief of police, you have so many different hats that you must wear. And I have to tell you again, you wear them well. And I want to say that I know you have to deal with budgets, and it takes a lot of time to deal with budgets, or you have to deal with the community, and certainly you have to deal with the workforce, the staff, and everybody. And you have to deal with the public, in a sense. And then you have another part of you that I think is just so attractive, and that is the fact that you are involved in sports. And as you know, a lot of our kids, they see their future is playing professional football, or playing professional basketball, or playing some sports, And I think that automatically brings you closer to the young people, because I know that when they see you, I want to tell you something, their eyes light up and they know you. And that is so important. I don't think the community realizes how important that is. And I know you referee games, and I don't know what else you do, but tell us a little bit about that part of you. And I want to tell you this before you say anything. Folks, this man, I think he should have been a preacher. And I tell you why. I have been in the presence of many times when he has been the keynote or the guest speaker. And he don't talk long, but he says a lot. And not only that, but most of his presentation I've heard is somewhat biblically oriented, which is another part of it. It shows you the kind of chief of police we have. He also, has the religious side of him, and he quotes the Bible quite frequently. And I think that's so important. When you put all these things together, I wonder, how many hats which one hats do you really, really enjoy being? Because one of these days, where I came from, they call people like you Bishop. But I have to say that, that's part of you in terms of being what we call a holistic chief of police by virtue of doing all these things. What about the basketball and football and all those things that you're involved in? I would assume with the PAL and all those things.
Yeah, how refereeing evolved. I was in college, and my mom told me I needed to find a part-time job. So I picked up the newspaper, and I saw this opening that they needed some officials. I applied, and the gentleman hired me on the spot, and I was refereeing the next day, and that was 26 years ago. And so I've evolved in officiating high school basketball, football, and baseball and softball. But currently right now I serve as a high school basketball official. I serve as a high school football official, and I also serve as an NCAA college official, a Division II college official on the football field. It's I enjoy it. It's competitive. I get to see young athletes, as we say in the officiating world. The athletes are always 18 years of age every single year. We just get older every year. So it has involved me to be a better person and to know that student athletes are very vital to our community, and we are managers of the game as officials, and that's vital too. So those pieces of the nuggets work together, and it's a pleasure to see our student athletes here in Elizabeth City and this Albemarle region to be competitive, and the coaches are a vital part. They're the role models. They're the leaders of that sport and their craft, and they want to win, but they also teach life skills. So it's part of a life mission for me, not only as officiating sports, but to be part of the role making of our student athletes.
Okay, and I think the one thing that we didn't cover, and maybe you can briefly tell us a little bit about the community policing, because I think that's also vital, and many people don't understand what community policing is. Would you just tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Our community policing, I'll just talk about one program in a particular. We do what we call Adopt a Block, where officers are assigned certain blocks throughout the city, and they're to make at least a certain amount of contacts in that block to get to know that community in which they patrol or service, so the community can know their officer, and the officer can know the community in which we serve. Because we feel the community policing is important to bridge the gap, to have relationship now and not after the fact. Don't have a relationship after a Ferguson or after a Baltimore incident. We want to bridge that gap now. We want to build that relationship now. We want to build that relationship immediately. So these are officers, they're required, it's mandated that they make those community contacts. And community policing is important. It's just not about always stopping and issuing a citation, but why did a person have their registration was not valid? What was the reason? Is there something that we can do as a police department to assist you in getting your registration to become valid? And that's part of community policing as well. So we do have a unit that's assigned to that, but community policing is mandated across the entire police department, not just that one particular unit. That one particular unit oversees our police athletic league, oversees our national night program, oversees our neighborhood watches. All that's encumbered and part of our community policing unit. But one of the major programs is for us to get out of our patrol cars and know and get to have a relationship and build that relationship with people in which we serve every day.
Well, Chief, I think that, that this never ends because it is so much that we should know, and we have the guy who can give us all the information we need to know about the police department. And I think we just about halfway through our program that we would normally do in terms of getting information, because I think he just explicitly explained things that to the level where I think everybody could understand. And I often say that sometimes even I understand a little bit now. So, Chief, on behalf of the radio station here and on behalf of Clay Mercer and on behalf of myself, we just appreciate you. We appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to join, to kind of educate us a little bit on what goes on in the police department. So we want to say thank you very much. We appreciate you. We love you. And anything we can do to help make your job easier, just give us a call.
Thank you, and
Thank you.
Appreciate you all having us.
Thank you for listening to Around the Town with Hez Brown, recorded and produced at WRVS-FM Studios on the campus of Elizabeth City State University. If you are interested in becoming an underwriter for this show, call 252-335-3985.